Why was it essentially a half hour before the citizens of this state, of this island, were taken off alert?
Yeah, and again, it's just as difficult to get the alert out as well as to correct that alert, both seeing that delay there. Finally, General, does this give information to North Korea that they would not have otherwise?
Well, yeah, I think we've seen this on bomb threats in cities and universities where people start jerking our chain. And I think the North Koreans just got told, we've scared these people. You know, there's 320 million of them, and they put themselves into a panic, and we didn't even do anything. I think one of the best points was made, though, by a couple of your commentators earlier. The thing we have to worry about is miscalculation in war. And so the president's tweets and taunts to Kim Jong-un are irresponsible and harmful. And on the other side, what we fear is Kim Jong-un has learned from his father and grandfather, you can provoke us and we won't respond militarily. I don't think that situation's the same today. If we saw 10 North Korean missiles get refueled and put into a waiting pattern a year or 3 from now, because right now I don't believe they have an active threat to the continental United States, but they soon will, then our problem will be, do we launch on warning of a North Korean attack? And the answer is that's probably what we do. So miscalculation is a huge concern for the allies, Japan, South Korea, and the United States, dealing with North Korea.
That multiplicative effect that sits in that region of PAC, again, that we're watching in the Asia-Pacific region, all those other countries that are our allies there that may react to these very pieces of information that you're talking about and the tension itself. General Barry McCaffrey, their force in the state of Hawaii, in Honolulu. Thank you, sir, for your perspective and expertise on what has happened here. And again, we continue to watch some of the video that just came into us of those who were at the University of Hawaii. This, what we believe to be right after that emergency alert went out. And that emergency alert said, take cover. And individuals, it looks like in this particular video, are doing that very, that very activity, and then 15 minutes later said everything is okay, a false alarm. But boy, those were a scary at least 15 minutes for folks like that. Now let's bring in MSNBC contributor Naveed Jamali. Naveed, great to have you here. You are still an intelligence officer in the U.S. Naval Reserve, I understand, sir, and you have the very same concern that we were just talking about with the general here. What might this give in terms of information to those who are watching in North Korea about our preparedness?
Well, look, my personal view here is that there's 3 levels of concern. The first is clearly at the state level. This has been articulated ad nauseum in terms of the failure really to communicate back to the citizens. The second, I'm concerned about the president and his ability to synthesize information. Look, the goal of any intelligence officer is to present intelligence to a leader so that leader can make an informed decision. The practical part of this, Richard, is the ability to do that at Mar-a-Lago. And look, also the question of the president's willingness to even take intelligence. But then there's a third part of this, and that is, what do the North Koreans, and General Barry McCaffrey made an excellent point here, what do the North Koreans think at looking at this? And, you know, they're going to read the president's tweets, they're going to have some analyst who's going to be translating this from, you know, English to Korean, and that is a very, very scary thing. Could there be a misinterpretation? Is it possible the North Koreans could look at this and somehow, in their conclusion, their analysis, consider this might be a precursor to an attack? And that is, you know, that scares me tremendously.
You bring up a couple of variables there. There is that time frame that it takes for officials, we understand, according to NBC reporting, how long it takes for them to determine the trajectory of the missile, 3 to 5 minutes. And then for the state of Hawaii, that gives them another 15 minutes to react if you're on the ground. And in terms of the president himself, if he is in Florida, and we heard stories before earlier of the president breaking out a laptop to share information related, in fact, about North Korea before, whether he has the infrastructure to operate. Now, the reporting has been he does have the infrastructure on the ground there to react to such issues of intelligence. But your perspective on all of that put together?
Well, so let's separate that. There's a distinction between the president's ability to respond and, in the unfortunate world-changing event that he has to launch a nuclear attack. That is very different from being in a place where he can synthesize and be presented with intelligence. Look, we have a case here, Richard. This is a perfect example. We have a case where a state agency says a ballistic missile is inbound. No federal agency, Stratcom, all the list of other agencies don't have that information. This is a perfect example of someone sitting down and saying, okay, what is the truth? Is there a missile incoming or is there not? The question here is, does he have that not the capability to launch a nuclear attack, but the ability and the intellectual curiosity to sit down and synthesize and sift through that and make a decision? We still have yet to hear from the president. I mean, this has been a fairly serious event. I mean, for one level, just to reassure the American public, but the second, to know that the president is monitoring it, that when an event like this occurs, the president is going to sift through and decide what is fact and act accordingly. At the end of the day, he made the right decision, but I don't get the sense that, I'm not sure that Mar-a-Lago, just as a practical matter, has the ability to sort of pass this type of intelligence so that a president can make that kind of decision. That really concerns me greatly.
Naveed Jamali, thank you so much. Always great to have your perspective in the many roles you've taken on. One is, of course, being a double agent. We did not bring that up for this particular situation, but being an intelligence officer in the U.S. Naval Reserve, certainly able to give us good perspective on the processing of intelligence. Thank you, Naveed Jamali. We're going to stay on top of this right here on MSNBC, as we now just heard within the last couple of minutes via tape from the administration.